Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. I'm Gene Barr, your guest host. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what might happen in the Capitol in 2025 and talk a little bit about education issues, and we'll kick that off right after this.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for joining us. My first guest today is Representative Mike Schlossberg, who represents House District 132, which is part of Lehigh County. Representative Schlossberg, thanks for joining us here today.
My pleasure, Gene. Glad to be here.
So you've been in since a member of the House since 2013?
That's right.
Okay, but interestingly, and you and I were talking a little bit about this before, we knew each other before you came into the House.
Yep.
Because you worked for the Greater Lehigh Chamber.
Yes, sir.
Did I get that correct?
Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce.
Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce.
It's still drilled into my head. My old boss will be proud of me.
Always will. You probably have a tattoo on it.
We don't talk about that.
That's probably someplace. So during my days at the Chamber, we worked quite a bit. And one of the things you did, interestingly, was working on a show that they had very similar to this.
That's right. Business Matters. The Chamber of Commerce was arguably the best job I possibly could have had, especially somebody who is a relatively progressive Democrat, because it really taught me the importance of building community, the importance of supporting our business community, and all the ways that a good business community can impact a variety of things, not only in your community, but a lot of really progressive goals. Things like making sure kids get a great education from pre-K all the way through college, making sure that people are prepared to enter the workforce, and understanding the impact, the good impact that businesses have on the community as a whole.
How have you taken that into your current job? You've been able to adopt some of those and adapt them into some of the public policies you're working on?
Absolutely. I think one of the things you really find when you work in the business community is how important it is that you merge the goals of a business community and a broader community as a whole. Great example of that is the Main Street program. And that's actually where I started at the Chamber. It's a state-supported program where you have a basically community development person running around communities trying to help businesses, provide them with expertise, create community events, promotional materials, and find additional funding to support a community as a whole. That's a perfect merger of what I would call traditional progressive goals, but also really traditionally conservative goals of helping a business community. And that's something that working for the Chamber has taught me, and I like to think something I've been able to work on as a member of the General Assembly.
Well, that's good to hear. Hey, let's talk a little bit about, I know it's been a couple months, but the election results still resonate, obviously.
We try not to think about it.
Well, I understand, but that's one of the things that I want to touch on, because from a nationwide basis and in many parts of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth, didn't go well for Democrats. Of course, you remember the Democrat Party. You had the Republicans win 3 row offices. You had the Republicans take over one of the U.S. Senate seats. Of course, Bob Casey, the incumbent, was defeated. And of course, at the national level, Trump was elected president again. But at the state House and state Senate level, not much changed. I mean, the numbers are still the same. You still have a margin of 1 in the House, still have a margin, well, with the one vacancy in the Senate, one-ish. I know that there's an issue there. So it didn't change much in either the state House or the state Senate. Why that disparity? Why did the Republicans do so well at the national level and in some of the other races, but not quite as well at the state House, state Senate level?
And candidly, it's a point of pride. Obviously, for the Democratic Party as a whole, it was a rough election night, but the fact that we held on to the majority in the face of such a red wave, in the face of millions of dollars in dark money, we're really proud of the job that we did. And I think it comes down to 2 things. First and foremost, we had an agenda that I think people supported. We worked very closely with our very popular governor, Governor Shapiro, who really put himself on the line for our majority. We achieved a variety of goals, including increased education funding, expanded property tax relief, expanded middle-class tax credits, that we could run on and say these were areas where we were successful. And secondly, frankly, we had great candidates that ran really, really good campaigns. You had people surviving. You had, I believe, 5 or 6 House Democrats that won in districts that Donald Trump won. And that doesn't happen by accidents. Now, the power of incumbency unquestionably was an important role, but we had candidates that just worked their butts off, and people liked what they saw and returned us to the majority. And hopefully, we'll be in a position to achieve more of our goals working with our Republican friends in both the House and the Senate.
Do you sense more of a willingness for that collaboration? Do you see some of that moving forward?
Absolutely. I think, in talking to some of my colleagues, it's great to pass a bill out of the House. but if the bill doesn't get to the governor's desk and become law, all you're really achieving is a messaging win. So one of the things I think all of my colleagues in the House understand is that we're going to have to give and take. Whether we like it or not, Pennsylvania is one of only a handful of states that has a Democratic-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate. That means that if we want to pass our agenda, we have to pass some of theirs, and that's something we have to be willing to do.
Okay. Part of that, one of the things, let's talk a little bit about this after we come back from the break. We're going to move to break, but I'd like to talk a little bit about one of the civility issues and maybe how we can move a little closer to that. So we're going to cut away here for a moment, and we'll end our discussion again when we come back. Thanks.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. My guest today is Representative Mike Schlossberg. And before we broke, we were talking a little bit about how we bring some sense of compromise, cooperation back. And just before we go to a couple of other things, what do you feel about open primaries? Some people think that that's one way of doing this. It kind of forces people to talk a little more. And
I've bounced around on open primaries because, candidly, it's hard. On one hand, it's not asking much of voters to say pick a party and register. And if you want to be an independent, that's fine, but then you don't get a say. On the other hand, and I think this is where I've settled, you have an increasing amount of people who have registered as independents who still want to be able to influence the political process in a primary, which is very, very important. I think at this point it might add some civility and, dare I say, some sanity back into the political process, and I'd be willing. I think I did sign to co-sponsor the bill, and it is something I support at this point because you can bring more people into the political process and have their voices heard.
Think it'll be taken up this session?
I hope so. We tried to last time, and unfortunately we kept running into issues where amendments were filed to the bill that really would have messed up the process significantly.
Okay. Well, you are a member of House Democrat leadership, and you are the House Majority Whip. So tell people what that means when you say you are the House Whip.
So think of Kevin Spacey in House of Cards minus killing people, and there's where you're at.
It's an important thing to keep out.
I think so, too. No murder. The goal of the whip is to count the votes and to make sure that we have robust support for our agenda and that members are voting for, are combining the needs to represent their districts, but also their caucus. And it is a challenging job because when you're counting votes and making sure you have the votes to pass and you have no room for error, it makes life a little bit more interesting. People keep congratulating me. I keep saying I have no room for error and I'm the whip. I don't really know if I'm a particularly smart person. But it does put you in a position where my job is to make sure we're representing our districts, our members are representing their districts, but also we can advance a caucus agenda that helps the Commonwealth as a whole.
So there's 102 elected Democrats, 101 elected Republicans. Now you've got one member who's currently on some leave.
That's right.
But so let's say that individual comes back. In my experience, what I've heard from other people in your capacity is that it's easier sometimes when you have just one vote because nobody gets a pass. Can't say, oh, I really don't want to vote for this, go to so-and-so. Have you found that?
So far, I get that. I get that as a culture because we were at 102, 101 last time. I wasn't the whip. I was a caucus chair previously. But I'm very lucky in that we have caucus members that let us lead. We have caucus members who believe in the agenda. Now, that's not to say that they're going to roll over for Democrats. They represent their districts. And there's no question that if one member says no, that's it for a bill. So our job isn't to break arms necessarily, it's to craft an agenda that meets our caucus needs, but also reflects the diversity of the House Democratic coalition.
What's that agenda look like in 2025? Obviously, you got the budget coming up in just about a month. So what's that agenda from your side look like going forward here?
I think the first thing we've got to do is find ways to make Pennsylvania more affordable. I don't think there's any question that cutting costs is at the top of the minds of voters, especially in the inflationary environment we live in. That looks like a few things in my mind. First, we've got to make housing more affordable, reduce rent. That occurs on two levels. First, you've got to try to control costs, sure, but we've also got to make it easier to build houses. We need more housing in the worst imaginable way. We simply cannot build them fast enough.
Is that permitting reform?
I think permitting reform's got to be a part of it. I also think there's got to be tax incentives in there, too. I don't necessarily think there's Democrat or Republican answers here. I just think we need more. Simple as that. There's also got to be a tax policy aspect to that agenda. That means expanding middle-class tax cuts like the earned income tax credits and working-class tax credits as well. But it also, in my mind, means reducing property taxes or, at a bare minimum, holding the line. And if you're going to actually do that, you've got to put more money into education. Funding education is a goal that makes everybody happy because you create world-class educations for kids no matter where they live, and you can also hold the line on property taxes. And I think that's critical for every Pennsylvanian and for our competitive future.
Any personal policy issues that you have going forward that you'd like to see injected into this discussion?
I will always be a fierce advocate for mental health and for making sure we can get people access to the mental health care that they need. I've been very open with my own mental health challenges, and I've tried to use those to decrease stigma surrounding mental health, but then also to turn that into real policy goals. We have a massive behavioral health practitioner shortage. People are suffering more than ever, and they can't get the help that they need. I'm definitely hoping that we can put more funding into behavioral health recruitment and retention. On a personal level, I'm also taking a look this year at reforming our 3R2 system, the involuntary commitment system, whereby people are unfortunately sometimes held because they're having behavioral health issues and they're a threat to themselves or others. It's a system that's woefully, mercilessly out of date and needs updating.
Good. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Representative Schlossberg, thanks for being on with us here today. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit to some folks from Pennsylvania State Education Association about some of those issues and meet the Paraprofessional of the Year. Back in a few moments.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. I'm joined now by Becky Marszalek and Rachael West. Becky is the State Education Association's Dolores McCracken Education Support Professional of the Year. I want to make sure I get that right. And she's at Avonworth Elementary in Pittsburgh. And Rachael West is the Treasurer for Pennsylvania State Education Association. Thanks to both of you for coming on. Welcome to the program. So first, who was Dolores McCracken?
So Dolores McCracken was actually PSEA's very first president who is actually an education support professional, and that was a really big deal for us and a milestone. And so after Dolores passed in 2018, we renamed this award after her.
All right, great. So Becky, you are a support professional. How did this award come about? How did you wind up being the Support Professional of the Year?
A colleague at school had nominated me for this award. And then I had to go, and we had to get letter of recommendations from my principal and some of the parents that I have worked with their students. Just some information about myself and community service that I've done and what I do at school. Just some stories that went onto the nomination committee, and I was chosen as the Pennsylvania nominee.
And what age groups, grades do you deal with in your capacity as a support professional?
I have worked from kindergarten all the way through to 11th grade, and I've done all the buildings.
Do you change from year to year, or do you do that in any given year you'll work with the same?
It depends on where the need is and where they want me. Like, for an example, last year I was in 3rd grade working with a student. We had a good rapport. They asked if I would move on to 4th grade with him this year. So it just kind of depends where the need is.
When did you become aware that you were nominated for the award?
I became aware of January of last year. And then I found out kind of in May. It was like kind of leaked that I had won. And then last month I went to Philadelphia and presented a speech to PSEA members.
you had to present a speech. Is there an interview process? You have to write essays? How do you progress in this competition?
I did not have to write any essays.
Okay, good.
So I guess everything just from my nomination moves on to the national now.
Okay. How many folks like Becky are there across the Commonwealth schools?
So I would say there's 30,000, give or take, people that are working in the schools doing jobs like what Becky does. She talked about how she was a one-on-one classroom aide with a student. We also have people that are classroom assistants that would work more assisting the teacher directly. And then we also have a ton of other people that are also very much behind the scenes. Our education support professionals are our cafeteria workers, our bus drivers, our custodial staff, our secretaries, the admin assistants, basically all those people that are doing the jobs outside of the professional staff, which is what people usually think of when they think of schools.
Great. One of the great stories that I was told about this is you actually helped somebody who is disabled in a wheelchair become part of the band.
Yes.
Was this someone you knew, had worked with before?
This is a student that I had worked with.
And you volunteered to do this?
It was through work, yes. So whenever I started at Avonworth, I started with that student in 3rd grade, and I followed him through. And once he got to high school, he wanted to join the band. And in order for him to do that, he needed support.
Because it's a marching band.
It's a marching band.
And so you had to learn all of the routines for the band, travel, I think you said, through band camp, all the home games, the away games, and learn all these routines and go out on the field for all this.
Yes.
Okay.
I had to bear the cold and go out and push him in his chair as he played the drum. So, and I enjoyed every second of it.
Played the drum.
He played the drum, yes.
And was that just this past year, or when was it?
Oh, that was, years ago. He's been graduated now, and so I've been at Avonworth for 18 years. So it was, I would say.
That's phenomenal.
10 years ago, maybe? Great. It's been a while.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back after these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania American Water. We keep life flowing across the Keystone State.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. I'm joined by Becky Marszalek and Rachael West. We're talking about the Support Professional of the Year Award. So, Becky, I think I also read you've also been engaged with your local fire company over the years.
Correct.
So, it sounds like to you this civic engagement is really important.
It is, yes. It's very important.
And you've maintained some of that and working with your community.
Yes.
It seems like that's something that's kind of dying away. We're not seeing as many people do volunteer fire, do the kind of things you've done, as well as, local firefighting.
That is very true. It's a hard job, and, I just don't think the people want to do it, but yes.
Yeah, it is. Let me just switch gears for a moment. Rachael, if I could ask you, obviously we're students, schools, teachers had to deal with the effects of COVID, schools closed, et cetera. How are things advancing after that? We're now back, obviously. And that was a setback for all of us that was incredibly unfortunate. How are things going now from your perspective?
I actually think that, schools are, quote, back to normal, right? We're doing things the way we were before COVID, but there are some things that really, COVID affected our students in ways I think we weren't necessarily prepared for. And I think we're seeing a lot more need for our support professionals now. There are students that have a huge gap in their learning because some schools weren't able to still give instruction during that time. So there are a lot of students that missed several months to a year of instruction. And so we are finding a bigger need for people like Becky, who are willing to put in that extra passion to work one-on-one with a student that maybe has some more needs than they did before.
Are your teachers also seeing some social re-engagement that they have to do in addition to the academic side? I mean, you had kids home for a couple years, might not have had siblings, might not have had much social engagement at all. This was really a difficult thing. Are you seeing some of that as well?
I think we're seeing some of that, but I do think that at this point, we've had enough time back in school, that piece has actually started to level off, if you will.
Okay. All right. What are some of the issues that PSEA is going to be working on for this year? Obviously, the budget's coming up in a year. It's always important for you guys. What are you guys looking at for 25 and 6?
Well, there are two main focuses that I would say we're looking at. One is obviously, as you mentioned, the budget. We are really hoping to continue to see Governor Shapiro helping us find more funding, and continue to work towards equitable funding of our schools. And the other thing that we're really looking for right now with that funding is to find ways to get more of our support professionals. We want to recruit and retain those people with that passion to work with our students. And one of the things we really need is the funding to pay them a living wage. Okay. We're looking at $20 or more if we can to help continue to get those people, draw them to the position.
You having trouble recruiting people for these positions? Is that an issue, or does it vary by parts of the state?
Across the state, it does vary. In some areas, it's a harder position to fill, but we are having a lot of staffing shortages across the state in our teaching and ESP ranks, and our education support professionals are a really important piece of helping schools run smoothly and students and teachers be able to get the job done while they're there.
Still teacher shortages, still substitute teacher shortages, I guess, as well?
Yes, there are staffing shortages across the board. Support staff, teaching staff, substitute teachers. We're having trouble finding those people that are willing to do those jobs. What
kind of steps are you taking in terms of recruitment?
Well, as I mentioned, we are looking for our support professionals the livable wage. We are also working for teachers. We have gotten the student teaching stipend. So now teachers, children who are going into teaching don't have to take that semester where they're student teaching with no income because they can't have a job while they're student teaching often. So this is a way to take that barrier away. If there are kids that really need to work, they're able to get that stipend and be able to go into teaching. And we're also looking at grow your own programs and different ways to help people bridge a gap that maybe they weren't able to go right to college, but they would be able to use a grow your own program as a way to get that done and then become teacher.
Okay. And of course, Pennsylvania's long been known for having institutions of higher learning that teach teachers.
Right.
Are you still recruiting from there, still seeing those positive results come out of those education?
Yes, we are. Good. We are still seeing it's just that the numbers are low.
Got it. Okay. So you now move on to the national competition. When do you hear that?
In March. I will go to Louisville in March with my other fellow nominees from other states, and somebody will be nominated as the National Paraprofessional of the Year.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. It'd be great to have the National Support Professional of the Year be from Pennsylvania. So thanks to both of you for joining us here today. And thanks to all of you for coming on and watching PA Newsmakers. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you next week.